Models attempting to explain obesity. The set point model. A set point is a type of internal thermostat. The set point model explains obesity as the norm for some because their set point is set at high levels. Note, this model ignores factors of taste, learning, and social context in eating. Early evidence for this model came from experimental studies of voluntary starvation and overeating. During World War II, Ansel Keys studied 36 men who volunteered to participate in a study on semi-starvation as an alternative to military service. For the first 3 months, participants ate normally. Then for 6 months, they received half their normal caloric intake, with the goal of reducing body weight by 25%. Initially, the men lost weight rapidly. However, as time passed, pace of weight loss slowed, forcing the men to consume even fewer calories in order to meet their weight loss goal. The psychological effects were dramatic. The subjects did nothing but think and talk about food. They even spent time collecting recipes. Bennett and Gurin in 1982 hypothesized that both hereditary, research on adopted and biological parents and twin pairs, and environment contribute to the establishment and maintenance of the set point. Kessy in 1980 hypothesized that set point acts to keep weight within a range rather than a precise point. However, deviations from set point are possible. Why is the body so good at maintaining its set point? Evolution, the capacity to store excess calories as fat, was an important survival mechanism, especially for species that were able to eat only infrequently. Natural selection favored those human ancestors who developed thrifty genes, which increased their ability to store fat to sustain them until the next meal. Genetic explanations. Obesity runs in families. Monozygotic twins are similar in terms of BMI, regardless of whether they were raised together, or more similar than dizygotic same-sex twins. Adopted children's weight is more similar to biological parent than to the adopted parent. However, eating patterns are also shared in families. Positive incentive model. The positive reinforcement of eating encourages people to eat more. Obesity is looked at in terms of personal pleasure, social context, and biological factors, such as blood glucose levels. Food variety. A greater variety leads to greater quantities consumed. If only one food is available, a moderate amount is eaten. If a second food is then introduced, the amount of new food eaten will be more than if presented by itself. Sensory-specific satiety. Even thinking there is more variety leads to more eating. People eat more jelly beans when mixed up than when a number of varieties are served separately. What if you can't keep track of what you've eaten? The bottomless bowl experiment. Subjects were asked to eat soup until they had had enough. In the experimental group, a tube continued to fill the bowl from the bottom so it could not be detected. The experimental group stopped eating after consuming, on average, over 70% more than those who knowingly refilled their bowls. Bottomless bowl subjects did not feel any more satiated, nor did they believe that they had eaten any more than those in the control group. Unit bias. This is where we assume portion and unit of sale is appropriate. Consider the new supersizes. Eating and the social context. 3 main factors influence whether we eat more or less when we are with others. Social facilitation. Urging by a dinner host. Time spent at the table. The longer a person sits socializing, the more he or she will nibble. Impression management. In some settings, we eat small amounts to avoid seeming rude. Modeling. Eating whatever they eat. We may eat a little as a new hire at a business meeting, but eat seconds or thirds at a friend's family reunion, even if he or she is full. Internality-externality hypothesis. Schachter found that physiological hunger was less important in eating for obese than for those of normal weight. Experiment with obese and normal weight individuals who ate crackers when they had either skipped lunch or had been fed lunch as part of an experiment. Obese individuals ate the same number of crackers regardless of whether they'd eaten lunch. Obese individuals are more responsive to external cues. For example, what time it is, whether food smells good, or whether food is available. Nibbett in 1972 observed that obese individuals behaved like the starving subjects in the Keyes 1950 study on starvation. Polivy and Herman studied dieters and found that constant food deprivation rather than obesity may cause behavioral peculiarities in eating. They developed the concept of restrained eating and a scale that measures factors relating to constant awareness and restriction of food. Restrained eaters were more responsive to taste and ate by the clock regardless of their weight. Experimental studies evaluating restrained eating use food priming techniques that involves consumption of a small amount of food called a preload or prime, for example, a milkshake. Next, they are exposed to food and food consumption is measured. Restrained eaters who had been required to drink 2 milkshakes later ate more ice cream than restrained eaters who had drunk none. With higher levels of restraint, the food prime disinhibits restrictions people place on eating and consequently increases food intake. This disinhibition is more pronounced in females. Recall, in 1965, more than half of U.S. men were smokers, but only about 34% of adult women smoked. Since then, both men and women have begun to smoke less, but the rate of smoking for men has declined more sharply, nearly equalizing the percentages of male and female smokers. Women probably don't want to quit because of the fear of gaining weight. Young adult women smokers self-report using smoking for weight and/or food intake control purposes more than male smokers. Smokers who are restrained eaters reported weight control expectancies about smoking to a greater degree than non-restrained eaters.